and we'll get started. So again, there is no formal presentation here. There is no webinar. That's not what this is. That's not the idea behind this. The idea is for us to be able to talk and to share stories and to think of ideas and things that we can do to make things better and to do better at our home institutions, as an organization, just all across the board. So with that, if there's anybody that wants to share a story or something that's happened to them, please feel free to do that and start doing that now.
Okay, I'm going to talk first because I told Taylor I would. And I really want to thank all of y'all for being here today and joining in on this dialogue. I want to say thank you. I think Brandy Smith's sitting here and she's listening. She's actually on the high school side of things, but I was deeply inspired by something she's doing on the high school side of things that some of you might be aware of. And she kind of created a space, I think along with some other people, called The Table. It's a Facebook group, and it's really just to share those stories. And for me, I haven't actually posted in that group, but it's been really powerful to see other people who've experienced things that I've experienced, that sometimes I think as a Black woman and a Black professional, some things happen and I think to myself, oh, well, maybe you're overreacting, or what are you seeing? Why are you reading into this way? But to see those stories have been really inspiring to me to know, maybe some of these things happened when I was a little bit younger in my career, but they did mean something, and that was important to recognize and give space to. And I thought when I was talking to Taylor about options that we should give space to that as an organization as well, and have it be a launching board, I think, for us to be able to speak about things we've seen and experienced, but also if we aren't speaking up in our offices, those things will just continue to perpetuate. So I don't know how many of you came knowing exactly what this is going to be, but I just kind of wrote down a couple things. One particularly long story, then a couple things that I've experienced as an admissions counselor that made me uncomfortable in the moment. And now revisiting them, I'm like, oh, that was uncomfortable. And I should have said something sometimes, but also there's kind of, I think, a lot of times a fear in saying some of those things. So I'm going to try and be quick and then leave the floor open to some other people to talk, hopefully. And hopefully by going first and making myself feel uncomfortable, the rest of you will feel a little bit more comfortable to speak up. So just some things. So last travel season, I, for the first time, went to probe fairs in North Georgia. Before that, I always had just Metro Atlanta. And I was driving up to fairs, and I had to go to a fair across the street from a government building that was flying a Confederate flag. In the same day, I was at a college fair, and I was on one side of the gym, and thank God I was on one side of the gym, because on the other side of the gym, there was a group of students who were white, who repeatedly kept saying the N-word in front of other admissions counselors. And I think that the other admissions counselors who, they were just as uncomfortable as anyone would have been, but they came and told me, and I was like, okay, why are you telling me? I don't want to hear this. Is making me uncomfortable to know that those kids might come up to my table in a second, and I can't treat them any differently, because then, I'm the professional, I'm the adult, but why should they have a pass? Why didn't you just go to their counselor? That all happened in the same exact day, actually, in North Georgia. Now I don't ever want to go back to North Georgia, even though there's beautiful apples and nice wine up there. I don't know if it's very much worth it to me anymore. I remember in my first travel season, being in Atlanta, going to lots of primarily Black schools, and telling them how great the institution I worked for was, and how much my experience was amazing. And one day driving home and realizing how much Confederate imagery they had to pass to get from Atlanta to my school. And why would they ever want to do that? And what would be the feeling they got when they got to the info session after passing flag after bulletin, after billboard, after sign, that would make them probably uncomfortable in a way that they already felt a discomfort about coming down to where Georgia is. One small thing, I'm always nervous when I change my hair before I go into the office, and who's going to say what and why they would say it. And if I'm going to be perceived differently, or God forbid, I meet someone who was really important that day, and that's the day I wore braids, and now am I not professional anymore? That's, I think, probably every Black woman in this chat is probably like, yep, but it's a constant thought. You can't ever just, just go how you want to go. There's always 50 thoughts you have to have to yourself before you make any of those changes. But the one story that stuck out to me the most, and I think it's the story that's the biggest learning opportunity, because of course none of you in this chat are in charge of signs or people's property where they fly flags, but in my first year working in admissions, I really, really wanted my office to do diversity training. And that was something specific to the office I worked in. I think every single office should do some type of training every year, but it was really important to me that this office did it. And I brought it up to anyone I could bring it up to. And finally I was told hey, we can actually make it a part of our monthly meeting. You can bring someone in. So I was really, really jazzed about it. So excited to have this, first step. So I actually went to our multicultural office on campus, because I was sounds like there'll be free people there to talk to us, so we won't have to pay. And I didn't have a budget for that. And so I sat and talked with them. And I actually got a graduate student who was a diversity educator on campus to come. Like very intentionally picked a white woman to come have this conversation so no one would feel uncomfortable in the conversation, which I don't think I should have had to do, but that's just the reality of life. I sat with her and talked to someone I actually knew personally, so it was really good. We could have a really good conversation about like where this office was, what the campus climate was. She was aware of that. And we decided, sorry, my voice is very shaky because I'm nervous, but we decided that we should make the conversation about identity. Like, let's not start the conversation with privilege. Let's not start the conversation with racism. Let's not start the conversation with demographics on campus. Let's do the smallest step. Step one, what is your identity? What does that mean about how you see and perceive the world? And the first activity we did, and I honestly don't even remember if we did things after this because I kind of like fully like I blacked it out. We were just, the lady who was facilitating said, okay, consider your gender, your sexuality, your race, your socioeconomic status, and pick 3 terms to describe yourself considering those things. And I had written like Black woman something. Person next to me had written Black woman something. And we were sharing out, and people in my office shared things like cat mom or human, or just things that I'm like, did you not listen to the directions? I did the best I could to make this conversation literally step 1 for you all. And no one's comfortable enough to even say like, well, I'm white or I'm a man. Like, that's not anything wrong with that. That's just what you are. You didn't pick that. And I was super uncomfortable. And then, you know, I raised my hand to share and say like, Black woman, like we started talking about race and gender and sexuality. Here's what I am. And no one else really spoke to that effect again. After the whole meeting was over, people from my office, specifically some of my white coworkers, were like, oh, that was really awkward how no one said anything about what was actually supposed to be said. That was so strange. And I was like, yeah. And in my head, I'm like, why didn't you? So like, why do I have to be the one? Like, I said my, you know, what I identified as, but I'm not going to raise my hand and be like, hey, you guys are all ignoring the instructions purposely. Because now I'm the angry Black woman if I do that. And I'm already the one who pushed this training and pushed that we do and did all these steps to find someone here. Is it also on me to make sure that we actually take advantage of the training? And why is it that you feel super comfortable coming into my office, shutting my door and complaining, but you didn't feel that comfort around your coworkers? And like, since then, I mean, I still want to do the things I want to do. I still try to push for like diversity education wherever I am, or when I present, make sure I discuss. But that really, like, I think affected me early on as a professional, that like, okay, well, where's my voice? And if you're an ally, then you can't be an ally behind a closed door. You have to be an ally wherever you are. And I think that was the biggest takeaway for me early on. So, yeah.
Thank you, Shireen. Anybody else? I mean, this is here for all of us to talk about. So I know it may be awkward, but feel free to open up and share.
I don't have a story per se, Taylor, but I do like the fact that some schools are expressing injustice, and that, you know, they're coming out and they're saying that, you know, we support you. And I see a lot of from Auburn. I know Jeremy works there, so I see a lot from Auburn. That's, you know, I'm a War Eagles fan. So I want to know, like, or do you feel that your school are expressing or supporting you as an African American staff member or faculty?
Yeah, I think that we've definitely started to have a lot of conversations about race in general. I think that one of the things that we've incorporated in our strategic plan is to kind of push for more minority recruitment. That's something that we've kind of seen go down. But as far as being a staff member, I mean, I definitely feel comfortable. But, you know, at the same time, I think that my experience is just that. It's my experience. And I think that there are some other people that probably don't feel the same way. So, you know, we're starting to have these conversations, and I think it's a good thing. But for me personally, I've had a good experience.
Hi, everybody. Just so jump in. I'm Tiffany Walter, and I guess it's kind of disheartening when you don't have that same experience. I distinctly recall me being a director of admissions at the institution where I work at. I specifically sent, we have our direct reports meeting and had a conversation with my vice president, who my vice president is amazing, and he's very, very supportive, but not having the same support from our senior, most senior person, which is our president. And to be, what was said was that the reason why she decided not to put out a statement, despite the fact that several other college presidents had put out personal statements and things of that, she stated her answer to, are you going to address the concerns of the staff, of the students? Are you going to do it? And her reflected answer was, I need to consult with, you know, with the system office to determine if that's appropriate. And it was very disheartening, to say the least. I wasn't quite surprised, but in the current climate, I guess I was surprised, because so many of her counterparts that she respects, who she looks up to, did address it. And you know, and again, even with my statement to my vice president, my statement, and it was done in writing. My statement was that we are not asking for you to take a position, so to speak. But what we are looking for you to do is offer some leadership and offer some guidance to say that while I understand the current climate that is happening, not only in your city, but, you know, all around, you know, in the country and all around the world, you know, I support you. And and I am open to engage in additional conversations and engage into some communication with our staff, with the students, with the faculty. And that did not happen. And now I made this request actually 3 weeks ago, and we have yet to get a statement or anything. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I agree, Tiffany. It's not that we want the university to take a side. You know, we have these different cases, these different videos coming out, you know, all over. It's not that you pick and choose, you know, what's right, what's wrong, or make it a political agenda. Just, you know, be support. Just say equality. We support equality for all. Just a blank statement.
Maybe I can share from the high school side, so it's not maybe so awkward. Hey guys, I'm Brandy Smith. I'm at Marietta High School. Cool to see some of my lovely reps and friends from when I was on the admissions side. So, you know, it's really interesting on the high school side, how different schools are sort of approaching this. Many of you go into private independent schools. On that side, it's a very different conversation than what's happening in public schools. If you aren't aware, I'll just start with the independent schools so I can talk about that quickly. A lot of schools, either their alums, their current staff, or some of their faculty and staff and current students have started Black at Instagram pages. You can pretty much look up any private high school in the country. Oddly enough, the greatest concentration is Atlanta private schools and New York City private schools, where folks just share anonymously their stories of what they've encountered in the process from teachers, from counselors, from administrators. So what I have found is in independent schools, they're really organizing themselves in a very different way. Many of them have directors of diversity who are helping to think about, like, what are we going to do moving forward in the fall? And like, many of the staff have gotten together and done like a call to action with their head of schools. On the public side, you know, we like to do things a little differently. So oftentimes, like, race is not something that is discussed at all in a public school setting, regardless of how diverse that community is. I'm in a pretty diverse high school where close to 70% of our kids are students of color, but we've also been around for 160 years. And in the fall, we started doing cultural fluency training for the first time in the history of the district and of the high school. And whew, man, I have never considered myself a drinker, but man, I have definitely consumed a lot of adult beverages. I forgot we're recording. That's awesome. Anyway, so it has been challenging because it's hard to be vulnerable and to bring your whole self and to have uncomfortable conversations with people that you work with. But the one thing I keep reminding myself is, like, we have to keep students at the center of what we're doing, right? Like, if we can't have these difficult conversations, how can we expect students to have these difficult conversations? And I think the reality is especially the closer we get to this presidential election, regardless of what the outcome is, tensions are rising. We're only halfway through the summer, y'all, and just think of the dumpster fire we're already in, right? Like, as a country, like, multiple pandemics. It's like living through the Spanish flu and like the Great Depression and the Civil Rights Movement, like all at the same time. So there's going to be more to come, and we have to keep in mind that when students come back, we are going to be dealing with kids who have had some major PTSD. They have been in the house for months dealing with the pandemic. For a lot of my kids, like, being at home is not the safest place for them to be, right? So there's all of just the family stuff. And then they're coming back to school. Some of them are going to be doing virtual. Some of them are going to be doing in person. Like, there are going to be so many inequities that come out in this process, right? And so we have to think about, like, how do we prepare kids to have the conversation? So I think that's been the only thing that's helped us continue to do the cultural fluency training, because it's hella uncomfortable, but like, we have to do it if we want to get it right for the kids. And like, what I tell kids, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, is that, like, what I worry about for our kids is they do the hard work, they get into your institutions, and then they get their freshman year and they're completely lost because K through 12, we haven't built their social emotional intelligence for them to know how to have difficult conversations, for them to, like, respectfully disagree with someone. And then they're just doggy pedaling their freshman year through your freshman experience class or whatever program that you have. And there's a huge disconnect, right, between the K through 12 and the higher ed. And so my hope is, if we can do this and have these difficult conversations, that hopefully that will help. So no, we're trying on the high school side, but, you know, I think especially as especially in public institutions, are going to come across budget cuts. When you got to make budget cuts, oftentimes things like professional development, like diversity initiatives, are some of the first things to get cut. So in some ways, our job may stay the same, or it may become even harder to do with less resources. So know that we, on the high school side, appreciate all the work you're doing, but I would say it is important too that y'all should probably be prepared that regardless of what your ethnicity is, kids are going to be asking these questions back in the fall. Like, when they come back in the fall, they're going to want to know, like, how safe is it for me to be on campus if I'm a student of color? What resources are available? Like, what counseling services are available? As a counselor, that worries me a whole lot, because I just think most of your college campuses, you're already stretched super thin in your counseling services, right? And so now kids are going to need you more than ever. You know, I mean, I think it is important, like, for white counselors to know things that maybe you haven't had to know before. Like, if your school has historically Black or multicultural fraternities and sororities, yes, you need to know that stuff when kids are asking, you know, questions about that. What are the student organizations that help support those kids? I think kids, and especially parents, are going to want to know that stuff much more. So I think it's important to do your research, you know, as you think about updates for the fall, think about those things. And yes, you can ask your, you know, Black colleagues or your colleagues of color, but know that it's also not their job to teach you, right? Like, it's like, Google is free. So you can just Google it, right? Or you can look in your brochure, because I think sometimes people don't think about the additional, like, social emotional labor that is put on people of color to not only do their job that they're compensated for, but to also be the diversity, equity, inclusion person, and they don't get compensated for that. Okay, I'm going to shut up now. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Brandy. And that's one thing that we've tried to talk a little bit about with the changing dynamics and, like, test optional. And that doesn't speak just to students of color by any means, but it does speak to a lot of students who are at economic disadvantages because we are test optional. At Columbus State, we lowered our GPA. So we're letting in students we typically wouldn't let in, and what resources do we have available for them? Both financial, academic, all the above. And how's that going to affect retention, not just yield, retention, graduation rates, all of that stuff. And I'll say the one thing that it has done is given students the opportunity that normally wouldn't have the opportunity to come to a university. And so that is great, but I'm worried that we don't necessarily have the resources available for those students to succeed. Because if we're going to let them in, we have the responsibility to help them stay here. And that's something that I am very, very afraid of happening. So I'm sure the same can be said with some of the other institutions here. I know Shireen sent me some questions that maybe could provoke some thought or some dialogue. And again, Brain just spoke to that. It shouldn't be up to Shireen to send me questions. I should be able to do it myself. But one of those is anyone's office preparing for the difficult conversations that might be happening in recruitment soon, especially in regards to race? Is that something that anybody's colleges or directors or VPs have addressed? Yes, no. Things we can be doing to help address those ideas, thoughts?
Yeah, so Taylor, I kind of wanted to jump in there. I think a lot of different institutions are beginning to try to figure out how they want to approach these different things. And some people are having leadership meetings where we're having these sorts of discussions, but people are deathly afraid of saying the wrong things. Or you have to walk on eggshells around people to put them in a position to be comfortable. So I wanted to ask the question, like, how are people, as you're engaging at your respective institutions or within your respective arenas, how are you guys engaging people who don't want to be engaged or who aren't participating in the conversation when this is a very important conversation? How are you guys going about that process, and how are you dealing with that when you know that it's not a priority, if you will?
Well, for Columbus State, we haven't. I'm not sure if Taylor or Katrina's been in any meetings or Zoom meetings about it, but we haven't. I think that it's something that we need to start. I got a few emails from students, from parents who students were accepted at other universities. I got a couple of emails from students who've been in like blackface and just trying to prevent the student from coming to to Columbus State or any other institution. So they would send out emails to all of the different admission email addresses. But it's definitely something that I think, Brian, that should definitely be addressed. Like Brandon was saying, students don't know what to say or how to react to certain things. I have he just turned 18 years Monday, and he's going off to college in Atlanta. Today is Clayton State. I don't know what it'll be tomorrow. But I have to talk to him about certain things because he doesn't understand a lot of things. I don't want him out, protesting if he don't know what he's protesting for. I know that I had to talk to him about, if he's pulled over by the police officer and what to do and things like that. But on other situations, he don't, need to be out rioting, or if he don't know what he's doing, he don't need to be out there doing it. So I think just talk to the students, or maybe something that, student affairs, talk to different students from their side, or get the SGA involved in students on campus. But right now, Columbus State is not having those conversations.
Hello, I'm Christina. So I would say, just to answer your question, Brian, my university has had a universal statement. However, I realize that what my president/chancellor believes is totally different from those that interact in their different departments, colleges, offices, day to day. And so within my actual office, they're not really talking about that, not addressing it much, but that's okay, because I realize that's why I'm at the table, that's why I'm there. So I address it, but I also let them know, I see you, like the same way they say, I see you now. And I'm like, did you not see me before? But I understand what you mean by I see you, like we see each other. And therefore, I'm okay. The thing about this whole social injustice is that it just didn't just start happening. Civil rights has been happening for a long time, and understand I might be a all the way left pro-Black girl where I'm like, okay, well, when can I get something for just me? Because civil rights includes everybody. And at that same moment, there's a lot of people that have gotten many rights within civil rights, but then forget and say some crazy stuff about just me being Black. So I have to sit back and understand. I understand which side you are, and I respect you for being true to who you are. Just be understanding that if I don't agree, that's just because you don't agree with me. So we have to understand that. And I understand my supervisor, he may not agree with what I agree with, long as we get this job done, but he has to also understand when I talk to students, I'm talking to them for what they actually believe in. So if I'm talking to a student and they're coming off and I say, hey, that's not, universities were not founded for that. That's not what this is for. You either gonna keep me or you gonna leave me. Either way it goes. And I know that's very strict to say, but that's just how I feel at this point. I'm really looking for allies. Like, I want an action plan. I don't want you to just sit here and say, oh, I'm so sorry that, you know, this is happening. No, how are you teaching your children? Because our children all play together outside until they get to that tender age of 12 or 13, and then all of a sudden they play differently. So when I go into high schools, I challenge all my students, hey, don't sit next to your best friend that's in your clique, that's in your stereotype. Sit next to the next person in this conversation, because I don't want you to think that because your friend is that way, that's what the university is going to look like when you get there. So I actually challenge children to start thinking that way, even in my presentations. Now, clearly, some universities have that right to be able to do that versus other universities, because universities come with different name recognition. But again, even within our profession, even with this round table, it's like, okay, you showed up to the table. What does it really mean? So when you ask that question, I see you, or you send that text message to one of your counterparts that says, I'm here for you, how? Like, when we're sitting in a meeting, if it sounds left wing, say something then. Don't just be as right winged as you would for anything else. If it treated as if it was that. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think that's one thing that it's easy for our administrators to fall back on. You know, well, we've got to worry about COVID. That's taking priority right now. But this has been going on long before COVID was ever around, and it's going to be going on after COVID leaves us, right? And so, and that's what I told when Sheree and I started talking about this. I said, this is not going to be a one-off. So this is just not for like GACRAO to hit the checkbox. Like, this is going to continue on indefinitely, right? Because the conversation needs to. This doesn't need to be like, oh, well, we did it and pat ourselves on the back. You know, we got to continue to have these conversations. And that doesn't mean necessarily every time we do something like this, it's going to be a roundtable. We're looking at getting speakers to speak on these things and have a little more of a structured program, I guess you could say. But, you know, I know that it seems like right now that COVID's taking over everything, and it doesn't need to. Because right now is so important for us to start talking about these on our campus.
Hey, Taylor, can I just say one thing? Christina brought up something that I think is kind of important. I think it's important too for like people to understand, like, yes, a lot of Black people want allies, but the same way I, as a Black person, don't assume that every white person is racist. It's important for white people to understand, like, Black people, we are not a monolith, right? Like, we think differently, we rock differently when it comes to this work. Like, I personally don't even like all Black people. I also don't like all white people or Hispanic people. I'm equal opportunity, so just know that about me. But, you know, I think one thing that was really helpful to me that our ROTC teacher said, and I think this is helpful because it does ebb and flow. I think for a lot of Black people, there are times where we're like, white people, you're so silent. Why aren't you saying anything? And there are other times where we're like, white people, please stop taking up all the space. You're killing us. and that ebbs and flows, right? And like as a white person, that could be really hard for you to understand, like, when do I say something, when do I not say something? One of the things our ROTC person said is that it's really important to know, like, when anytime he had to go into battle and he was battling with just his battalion, he felt like, okay, I got it. We know each other. We have each other's backs. But I'm on a webinar, Mom. Sorry, I live with my 93-year-old grandmother who does not understand Zoom at all. Sorry about that. Anyway, so he said when he would go into battle, like, and they would then have allies come and join them, he appreciated the support from the allies, but he didn't always trust the allies because sometimes the allies had very different intentions for the goals that they were trying to reach. And like when he said that to me, I was like, wow, like that makes a lot of sense, because he said, I appreciate that people want to be allies, but allies have to also understand trust is not something that I'm automatically going to give. And he's like, and if we relate that to race, for white people to assume that now because they are ready to be an ally, that Black people or people of color should automatically be trusting and be open to that is just really not a fair assessment, because history has shown us to not trust you, right? And to be cautious, right? And so I think what's important to remember is as you're working on being an ally, it's important to know, like, you can't always take it personal, and you just got to keep showing up, even when it becomes difficult, even when you're like, dang, like they are not paying attention or they don't recognize what I'm doing. It shouldn't be about what people are seeing you do. It should be about the stuff you're doing actually when nobody's looking. Those are the things that generally help us more. And so I think that's important to think about. And like I tell people, and this is, I think, because I'm old and I don't have any aspirations for like moving up for anything. Anyway, I like one of the things I always say too is like, I'm actually not as interested in having allies. I'm more interested in having accomplices, because allies can only do so much. An accomplice is somebody who's willing to take some risk. Like, to me, if you're a white person and you're willing to take a risk in a staff meeting and say, how come we don't have more people of color at the leadership table? How come we don't have more women at the leadership table? How come we aren't thinking about, when we have programs, do we have translators for families who don't speak English? Like, when you do that as a white person, you don't assume the same level of risk that I do as a Black person, because when I say that, I oftentimes could be literally putting my job on the line. Whereas in most cases for white people, that's not the case, regardless of what your title is in the hierarchy of your office. So that's just something I think that hopefully that can help people as you sort of think about it. Because I think people always say, like, we want allies, we want help, but then it's like, what are the tangible ways that like folks can get there? And so I think that's helpful to think. And you just got to be open to constantly learning. Like, I've been looking at everybody, they're like, oh, you want to know how to be a better ally? Read White Fragility. And I'm like, yo, reading one book, if it were that easy, we wouldn't be here. Like, you're going to have to be constantly reading multiple books, right? Like, and I would say, like, if you're going to read White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, also read White Rage by Carol Anderson, side by side, right? It's a lot of things overlap, but one's written by a Black woman, one's written by a white woman. So like, you got to constantly be educating yourself, because the reality is, whether you're white, whether you're Black, we all are having to unlearn so much of what has been ingrained in us. And like, we all also have to have some grace with each other as we sort of think about how we unlearn and relearn on top of our jobs and our families, and just like maintaining some sanity. So.
Hi, Taylor. Thanks for creating this space for us. And Shireen, thanks so much for working on this as well. I'm going to share a link in the group with everyone as you guys are kind of asking what institutions we're doing, or how our institutions, and particularly our offices, are handling this subject. Georgia Southern's athletic department took a huge stand, and they wanted to create a video. I think it's going to take about 2 minutes of your time, or a little bit over 2 minutes. For me, I thought it said everything that many of us were thinking and feeling. I think it's an accurate representation of how many feel. And so the first part of the video shows Black student athletes. And then the last part of the video shows their white coaches or their white athletes kind of responding to their messages. And I saw that as a very real way to move the conversation forward. And we actually even did so in a leadership meeting within admissions. We used the video as a jumping off point for a conversation that we had in our leadership meeting. And then also other things that we've done. We've had a university statement. We've had a statement by our chief diversity officer. That's actually a new position at Southern that we're really excited and proud of. But just as Brandy said earlier, the school she's serving right now has been around for over 100 years, and they just put, training, cultural competency training in, I guess, for teachers and faculty and staff members. That's not something we have through our HR department yet, but I think hopefully from the events this summer that we're going to start to have those conversations, because it really needs to be at that level. But in admissions, we had a statement from our director. And then that we also had a statement from our director to the team, but we had a statement that got sent from, I think, student affairs to prospective students. We wanted our prospective students to know what we felt about the issues this summer that went on. And I believe we actually called the name of some of the slain individuals. So in that letter, it talked about Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, like it mentioned them by name. So we're making strides, we're making steps. Someone said on here earlier, though, we don't want to just kind of do some things, we want to see action. And so I think that's where the conversation goes further. What can all of us on the screen do from our seats? And and it's already been said, while it's unfair to come to the person of color, and particularly through this context, the Black person, and ask for us to kind of lead in those discussions, I am trying to get the courage to get over that. Because if it doesn't start with us, what if we never have the conversation? And something really broke in me when I saw the George Floyd murder, if that's allowed. Something really broke in me, and I'm trying to, I have a voice, but I'm trying to find my voice around these issues, and I want to use it. And so if that makes me be the only one in the room and the only one bringing it up or going first, or the only one getting called on because I am the only one in the room, I'm going to take that mantra, I'm going to wear it, and it's not going to feel good, and it's going to be exhausting. But I am willing to do that work because I want to see change. And there's a lot of stuff that I actually did not see until 6 weeks ago. And so my eyes are open in a different way, and I want to embrace that and have the courage to stay right where it is. But please give some time to that video. And if you guys have things that your institutions have done that I haven't named, please share, because I want our admissions office at Southern to grow, and I want our university to continue on this path that we've now started.
I agree. I don't think that we have to wait until a committee is built before we start having those hard conversations. I was having a conversation with one of the directors at Columbus State, and me and her had our sons the same age, and we disagreed a lot of things when it comes to political arena, and also with the current movement in the United States. But I just simply asked her. I said, "Did you have the talk with your son when he got his permit or driver's license?" And she was like, "What talk?" So just from that little simple conversation, she understood where I was coming from. And like Shireen was saying about the hair thing, we can go from 1 inch on Monday to, 20 inch on Friday. So it's just simple, talking to a coworker, and she wanted to know how the extension works and things like that. I think just those little simple conversations, even when your school's not having that whole committee, just talking to your coworker or, talking to different students.
I think what Toby spoke to, obviously I'm a Georgia Southern stan, if you guys know me, you know that, but what Toby spoke to about the letter coming from admissions to prospective students, I really appreciate, because I didn't know that happened. I haven't seen other schools do that. But one of the questions I did have was, I think, how are schools addressing students who are coming to you and reporting, hey, do you know this prospective student or this admitted student was doing blackface or did this tweet? I remember that started happening, rippling through the state, and I was like, any second now, my school's gonna get one of these. And I told my director, like, we need a statement, and she said, okay. And then it happened, and there was not a statement prepared yet. And of course, from us, there was a statement from the university. And how are you addressing that? And then I also, like, to follow up with that, I don't know what every person's school is from here, but I know there's a good chunk of University System of Georgia schools, whereas I think sometimes as a public institution in the state, we get compared to private schools across the country where they can say, well, that student doesn't go here anymore, or we rescinded their, admission, but we don't have that ability. And how do you communicate that? Because I, as an adult, now understand that like certain types of speech are protected, and like I understand how FERPA works, and even if something happens, like I'm not finding out about it. But how do you communicate that to a student who at that point is hurt and angry? Like, how's your school addressing that? Those calls and those emails are going to keep coming, I think, now, especially with social media being what it is, and all these students are connected no matter what school they go to.
Shireen, thanks for asking that question, because I work in the technical system. So I'm on the technical college system of Georgia. And I literally just received access to all of our social media accounts for Savannah Tech, which is where I am. And it's interesting that you say that, because we have started getting those messages. We're inboxed on our Facebook page, receiving direct messages on Instagram, Twitter, like we're getting the messages. And unfortunately, because we are a state institution, we have to go based off of the policy that is clearly articulated, or as they believe is clearly articulated. And for me, I have to kind of give the kind of politically correct answer to that. And so that is, when a student presents it, I understand your concern. I see, I hear you. I see you. I see what you're saying. However, unless the student, the said student or the accused student is making a direct threat against, a faculty member, a student, or a staff member, in the present, unfortunately, we can't stop the student from attending. The only time that we can stop that student from attending or present this case to our campus police department for investigation is if they are actually posing an actual physical threat. So we have to not only abide by the actual physical law as it states, but also kind of the outline policy that we have both at the technical system and what we have written, which is identical, in our student policies, or our actual school policies, which our statements are actually identical. So so it's pretty much a case where we there's not really a whole lot that we can do unless the student is actually making a direct threat to an actual current, to a current student. Because one of the things that we're getting is, oh, this is a student and they may have that they attend Savannah Technical College, and then they have, I attended Georgia Southern University, I attended Columbus State, but a lot of times they're not even actual active students, especially on Facebook. So unfortunately, our hands are tied when we're working for a state institution.
Yeah, I mean, I know one thing that we dealt with just this summer was an Instagram post. So our admissions office posted a picture of our theater department, just as like a shout out and a highlight, right? And we didn't think anything of it. And it was multiple pictures, and one was from one of the plays that was an all person of color production. But we did not know that there was tension inside of the theater department that surrounding students of color, right? We had no idea. We didn't know that was a thing. And then like a week later, our student newspaper ran an entire article on that. But some of the comments that we saw on our Instagram page, we had no idea how to address. And when we ran to university relations, they said, just leave it alone. Don't say anything. And I thought that was so short-sighted. I thought it was something that we should have commented on, but we went through our proper channels and they were told to just ignore it. And it just felt wrong for us not to address that, because if there is something happening and we are addressing it, then students need to know. And so it is. I mean, it's something we didn't even think about what's happening inside of one of our departments, but it is.
It seems like the same people are talking. Sorry, but I do want to chime in and just say this real quick. I know that something similar happened at a previous institution that I worked at, and it was one of my mentees probably not the best advice that I gave my mentee. However, my mentee actually had an altercation with his roommate, black male, white male. And white male decided they were having, regular roommate altercations. You didn't wash the dishes. Your side of the room is dirty. RA, supposed to step in, do what they could do, but it just kept bubbling up. Either way it goes, at the end of the day, young white male decided to threaten young black male, told him that, hey, I'm a Boy Scout and I know how to tie a noose and stab a cow. Wrong thing to tell a black kid today, because as I'm gonna tell you now. So I told my HR people, which I said, why do you get trained in risk management but don't understand the risk that's coming from this? These kids are being raised with parents that were raised on the songs, Nuck If You Buck. Let me let you know, Caden has also told everybody in the world that he letting everybody know he gonna take that black eye and everybody gonna have rainy days. So I just think that we need to be able to tell our upper people, like, looky here, risk management is something serious. I think it's better to address something when it comes to acts of intent of harm. So versus just sitting here and saying, oh, well, let's not say anything, because you never know. Like, again, they waited, they didn't say anything, and now this verbal threat has come up, and my young mentee was ready to push his hands. Thankfully, he knew he could come to me and talk to me, but what if that student didn't have someone there? And I promise to you, he's not from, like Brandy said, everyone is different. No matter what their race is, everyone's socioeconomical class and upbringing is different. He ain't the one that was taught to sit back, listen, and then react. He was taught react, then listen. So I'm glad that he had me there in his corner. Just risk management things that we should be taking into consideration with the different types of students we're bringing onto our campus. Also, just want to say this before I get off. I'm glad Tiffany said which institution she worked at, which could be something that we could talk about as a whole traveling staff, as recruiters. We're giving advice when it comes to like different types of schools to go to, different type of college fairs to go to. Be cognizant of what you're saying to certain type of people when it comes to the area of a place that you're going to, because a recruiter even said to me, they were like, a lot of us don't like to go to the Savannah college fair because of the area it's in. Now, me being new to the area, not understanding that, go to Savannah and I realize it's on Savannah State University. In my mind, I could assume, oh, because this is an HBCU, that's why you said that. But then I was like, no, Christina, maybe the person got robbed or shot there and I just don't understand. No, technically, the area was not bad. No, everything was fine. People were still sitting out there partying until 2 a.m. in the morning. So clearly the area was fine. It was just because it was different and uncomfortable to you. Understand, and I could say the same thing because I wanted to be like, no, I was over there sitting at Vidalia and I was like, oh, no, ma'am, nuh-uh, because I'm from a city and I don't understand the country. That's not acceptable. If I don't get to say what I want to say that's going through my brain, I think some of us need to be cognizant of what we're saying and what's going through our brains. Pete, I'm sorry, I'm done.
Christina, thank you for saying that because I am actually the host of the Savannah Probe College Fair. And let me tell you, the reason why it's over at Savannah State is shout out to Savannah State University, but they provide the space for free. So that is why it is over at Savannah State University. Yes, it is a historically Black college and university. It has an absolutely amazing and gorgeous campus. However, it was a financial reason why we brought it over there, as well as the space capacity. No other place will you be able to have that many counselors and to be able to be tabled and have that many students and parents to be able to come in a safe environment, no less, for free. So that is why, so for any counselors who may be on here who are asking that question and wondering why that question, that is why it is there, because it was previously hosted at Armstrong State University's campus for a number of years, but because of the size and the capacity of the program, that's why it was changed. So case in point, if you have a question, you can call me and ask me. Thank you. It'll be hosted this year in August.
I was going to say, one, I went running every day of my high school. Believe it or not, I was accidentally on a track team in high school. And I used to go, we would run from Savannah Arts to Savannah State to y'all's little arena and run, and it was perfectly safe. So I don't know what that's about. I was going to point to that when it comes to those conversations about how to talk to students about issues on your campus, I recently, like, I'm trying to learn the power and also saying no as a young adult, because I think there's a power in saying no when you don't want to do something, when you have a valid reason. And I had a situation at my current institution where a student was posting, a current student, an alumni, and a prospective student were having a conversation on Twitter about something that happened on my campus a couple years ago. They're not even currently. They were going back and forth, and the person who runs their social media screenshot it and sent it over to me just to be like, hey, just so you know, this conversation's happening. And I was like, great. And I told my director, like, just so you know, this is happening. My director told my VP, just so you know, this is happening. And I didn't think it was going to get that far. But the VP was like, oh, can someone reach out to that prospective student to let them know that this institution is an accepting and equitable place and they'll be safe here? And I said, great, I'll get back to you over this. It was Friday. I was like, I'll let you know on Monday what I think about that. And I thought about it over the weekend and I responded and I said, no. I was like, why would I said, for one, the student is from Atlanta. It'd be me or this other person who's their admissions counselor. We're both Black. It's going to look as though, even if that was not your intention, that you sent the one Black, because we're the two Black counselors in the office, that you sent us because of that. And then I said, for two, I don't believe that. I don't think that we've created the most equitable or diverse environment for students. Why would I tell that student that if I can't stand in it? And that's not specific to my school. I think our system doesn't create the most equitable, diverse environment. There's not anything specific to one institution. And I told my director that, and she said, you know what? I agree. Thanks for coming back to me. You don't have to say anything, and I'm not going to bring it up again. But like, if you want to talk about this further, you can. I said, great. And so I think sometimes, I think what Toby said about finding your voice and speaking to your voice and finding power in that is very true. But I think there's also power in saying no, like, I'm not going to speak on that because I don't agree or I don't think that's right. And it was a really awkward conversation, but I think that sometimes we also have to find the power in learning how to say no. And I think there's sometimes that power, me saying no, I don't believe that, might cause another conversation at the higher level. Like, why doesn't our staff feel confident? And if they don't feel confident, what do we need to do to make them feel confident? Because like, as staff members, we should have the biggest buy-in for our university. We chose to work there and stay there. So like, we need to make sure that they're doing the right things at the top level to make sure we feel that way.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share? I don't want to have us just sitting here awkwardly at the same time too, just looking at one another.
Just to something that might be helpful is like, for the white people on the call too, like maybe you can find out like who are the white people like on the road counselors who are doing the work. Like, first of all, like, I hate the word woke because I just think people overuse that word. Plus, like, the reality is like, none of us are ever going to arrive, right? Whether we're white, whether we're POC, like this is constant, ever evolving work. But I do think there are like some counselors in high schools who are like working really hard to get it. So like, find out who those folks are, or if you're not sure who those are, like that I think is a good opportunity to ask some of the like Black people, like who are the counselors that you think are sort of getting it? Like when I think of like folks on the high school side, I don't know if you guys know Christy Conley. She's at North Oconee High School in Athens. She is literally going to kill me that I'm sharing her name because she's like, I'm not an expert. Like, I'm trying to figure it out like everybody else. And I'm like, yes, like that is true. But one thing that's always come clear across from me with Christy, like she never had to tell me she was an ally. I knew she was an ally in the questions she would ask me and how she was always thinking about all of her kids, right? And she was like, I was thinking like, why aren't more of our students of color in the AP computer science class? And like, how can I help to make that different, right? So like that helped me to know that she was an ally. And like, because generally the people who are like, hey, I'm an ally, most of them really are terrible at it. Like, like being an ally is not one of those things you have to go around telling people, right? Like it's like in high school, like you don't go around saying like, I'm the cool, popular one, right? Like people just know like you're cool and popular. It's kind of like the same notion. So I think that would be good. Nancy Bean is retired, but she'll still be around because like Nancy just can't like help herself. She's this little short white woman from East Tennessee, but let me tell you, like, you want to talk about an accomplice, like that little woman has held me down. She's answered the phone at 11 p.m. at night when I'm in the middle of tears and somebody's about to catch these hands. Like she like is amazing. So, like find out who those people are on the road who are doing those work, doing that work because I think it can help. And I didn't put the link in there because I was like, that might be inappropriate, but I do just want to sort of share tomorrow. Two other counselors and I are actually doing a SACAC webinar. It's called Allies. They're great until they got to be great. And it's specifically about how white women and women like can better support women of color in our profession. So because gender does play a role in it too. So if you just go like on the SACAC Facebook page or like website, you can register. You don't have to be a SACAC member to participate. And yeah, and even if you're a dude, you can participate too. So if you want to just email me or whatever, or go on the SACAC website, I'm happy to give you the link. But hopefully that can help. That can hopefully help folks too. So like, and I just need to say this because I feel like I've been extremely like frustrated sometimes that I'm like, white people just get in there and do it. Like just do it. Like who cares if you mess it up? Just try. And one thing I've realized is that like, one thing that is ingrained in white people, whether consciously or subconsciously, is that when it comes to race, you can't actually talk about it because to talk about it is to then be racist, which is kind of the opposite of what people of color have been taught. Like I didn't realize until a few years ago, like when most white people get together with other white people socially, y'all not talking about people of color. When people of color, when we get together, almost inevitably, white people are going to come up because we're trying to figure out how to navigate systems that y'all created that weren't created with us in mind. And so all the time we're thinking about it. And so I think it's important to know, like, it's okay for you to not be perfect at it. Like, but like also don't expect to get like a high five on the hand when you do get it right. Like you just got to keep at it. Like it's like exercising, right? Like, you know, like that first day of cardio, you like, damn, like I need to like get my life together. Like this is not working. But you know, by the time you're on like your 10th day, you're like, okay, this is great. Like I can recognize this. This may mean I get an extra slice of pizza because you keep building resiliency at it. And so I just think that's what we all have to remember. This is a marathon, not a sprint, y'all. Like we're all gonna mess up. We're all gonna be in it, and we just gotta keep at it. Okay, hopefully that helps.
Really quick, and then I'll let Taylor take this. I don't know if he wants to wrap things up, but one, Nancy Bean is everything, and I was going to do my regular plug for Georgia Legislative Day, which is coming up next year if everything goes smoothly and we're allowed in buildings in groups of people. But last year at Georgia Legislative Day, which I'll describe what it is in a second if you guys don't know, I was in a meeting with a state representative in Nancy Bean, and I was talking about the importance of diversity on college campuses and how that enriches the educational experience. And I was getting shaky because the person I was talking to, the representative, was not feeling me at all in a very clear way. He did not think I was correct. And he said to me, well, if you want diversity, you can go to a Costco. And I thought, like, I can't afford Costco memberships there. I don't know who you think I am. But fine. I go to other stores. But Nancy stood there and she like was able to, cause I think she saw that I was getting shaky and I didn't know where to go with this. And she took over the conversation for me. And I really appreciate it. So Nancy's everything if you haven't gotten to meet her. Hopefully you get to meet her. But if you guys enjoy conversations, like no one enjoys these conversations, but if you see the value of these conversations, Legislative Day happens every year. It is a SACAC program. GACRAO has nothing against SACAC. We can work together on those types of things, but it's a program that happens every year where college admissions professionals on the high school side and the college side go to the state capitol to advocate for students in the enrollment process. You don't have to be a member of SACAC to do that either. It's free. You get lunch and breakfast usually, and they're usually pretty good. And it's a really good day, and I think it's one of my favorite networking opportunities and something I've done every year since I've been in college admissions. I say that like I had another job before this. I've only ever done this. But I think if you're looking for that, just keep an eye out for those emails. If you don't get the emails, I'm always going to post it in every Facebook group I'm a member of when it shows up. So if you want to learn more about that, you can always reach out to me. My contact information is on the GACRAO website. But if you're a part of any of those like Facebook networks for admissions professionals, check out there. There'll be a lot of stuff. And if you're not a part of any of those things for admissions people or enrollment people, reach out because we can add you to those Facebook groups. I think they're really nice sounding boards and ways to be involved in the community. But now I'm going to officially be quiet.
Okay, I just have one last thing for real. I will shut up after this. I'm so sorry. I wasn't supposed to even talk at all. Another thing I just think is important to understand too is that, like when I said earlier about like gender does play a role, I think, obviously, I have never been a Black man in my life, but I feel the most for Black men in a professional setting, particularly in our profession, because oftentimes they are the only one in the room, or one of a few in the room. And I think culturally in general, right, like we're not a monolith, so there are always outliers and exceptions. In a professional setting in particular, Black men are not necessarily encouraged or taught to share emotions. And so what oftentimes happens is they completely shut down. They may share a little bit, but it's not like Black women, we tend to like just let it all out there and share a lot, right? Like also generality, not saying all. But I think that's important for everyone to pay attention to, like as we support also Black men. I mean, yes, there are definitely Black women who are unarmed, who are getting shot and killed in the streets, but that number is much higher for Black men. And I know as a Black woman, I feel a deep sense of concern and care for every one of my Black male friends, because that could have been my brother, my dad, my boyfriend, right? Like, and so I think it's really important to understand that from a societal perspective, we have been taught that the Black male is strong and is invincible and is all of these things oftentimes that have negative attributes, but also know that they are also incredibly like sensitive and also have feelings and are not going to always necessarily process those feelings even with us as Black women. So like, don't just assume they're being angry because they're being quiet. Sometimes it is in the best interest of everyone that they are being quiet. I keep saying to everybody, I'm glad all this happened when none of us were actually in our office spaces, because like it could have gone down a whole different way for a lot of different people. But I do think it's important to just recognize that. So just keep that in mind, because I think sometimes when we talk about Black people, we generally talk about Black people in generalities. We don't break it down by male and female. And I think oftentimes we are processing things in very different ways. And I think our brothers, especially our brothers in predominantly white spaces, especially need our support. So I just wanted to say that.
Yep. So Riley had a question. The microphone is not working. It says, I'll read it. How can we as white people bring up the topics of race in office environments or enrollment plans when we don't have many people of color in the office who contribute to the conversation? How can we come about it from a place of support and allyship rather than speaking for or over people of color? Even with the best intentions, things can come off as wrong or not as supportive as they were intended.
Riley,
go
ahead. No, go ahead. I'm gonna shut up. Yeah, no, you.
I was gonna say, if you ask it in a genuine way, I think when talking to having those hard conversations, if in my office, I'm very relatable to people that I work with. So it's easy for a white person to come up and ask me a question. I mean, we share stories. I mean, when I first started working at Columbus State, I learned a lot about them. They learned a lot about me. I didn't, like the what's the thing that I don't know, Taylor, the log water, the water log that you guys do? Is that something? I'm off topic.
I don't know what you're talking about, Viola.
No, I was learning a lot about them. I was trying to say I was learning a lot about them and they was learning a lot about me. So it's easy to bring up the race issue with me. And I think actually when it came down to it, we got so relatable with each other and talk about different things. So when the race matter came up, they was like, well, you on this side of the kneeling? I mean, you okay with people kneeling? They was confused as to why I was, on the side of, Black people when it comes to kneeling and doing the football games and stuff. So I think just being relatable and just talking to them in a genuine way. It does depend on the person that you're talking to. Like Jeremy was saying, everybody's experience is different. So it all depends on, your relationship with that person. But I think if you come from a genuine place and you really want to learn, I think anybody will be receptive of that.
Yeah, I want to speak to that because I think you said there weren't maybe many people of color in your office. The people of color who are in your office, you need to create a relationship with them outside of this one conversation you might have. So people who are really quiet in this chat, but I used to work with both Caleb and Devin, and I have a really great relationship with both Caleb and Devin. So at any time, I'm never like, why are they asking me this? And they don't really come to me often, but if they do and ask me a question, I'm never like, offended because we have a friendship outside of this one question they're asking me. So one, make sure you're building that relationship, which is what I think Viola was speaking to, because you can't just, roll to someone's office that you've never talked to and then ask them these hard questions because you don't know if they're going to even be open, or again, not a monolith. They might not care or want to talk about it. So make sure you're having those relationships with them. And then two, if the issue is like you don't maybe want to be the one person to bring it up, if there are people of color in your office, I always come to conversations where I'm slightly uncomfortable, armed with facts. So if you want to talk about enrollment management and how we can make, your enrollment plan more equitable, or how you can make a freshman class more diverse, I'm not an expert, but there's 1,000,001 webinars and 1,000,001 articles written about that. Read them, print them out, show up with it. I don't want to make you go write a paper and, cite an APA, but like come with the facts of, hey, it's shown that both the SAT and ACT are classist and racist. How can we make sure we minimize that in our process? Here is the proof. Then you're not speaking over someone. And like, obviously you can let people know, but you came with the fact. You didn't come with hearsay or your opinion. You came with something that's tangible and that's been proven. And I think that would also give you that confidence that you might not feel currently to speak on something because you would have done the work and then you have something to back you up.
One thing that I would add to Riley is that there are some conversations where we don't have to come to it, in my opinion, with the answers. We don't have to have the story or the solution, but simply sitting at the table and saying, hey, have we thought about how this could affect these minoritized populations? Have we thought about this from these perspectives? And at least just introducing the concept into the conversation, I've found that surprisingly sometimes to be helpful, because I don't have to sit here and pretend like I know what it's like to be my Black colleagues or to be these Black students or these students of color, but I do know that I can at least sit here and say, have we thought about it? So I think that's one thing that we can all do, even as white people in this room who don't have these stories, who don't have the same lived experience. We can at least bring up the topic and have the conversation.
I was going to say too, I think going back to the last 2 points is, so one thing I think that always resonates with those at the top of the food chain when it comes to enrollment management is data. Oftentimes I hear people say like, we got to be data driven. I don't know that I necessarily believe in being data driven, but I do believe in being data informed, because data informed helps to at least move the needle, but like it also allows for human stories, right? And I think you got to keep at the center, like we're still dealing with young people and students. And so, I would say like too, like if there's anything in literature about your school where you're saying that you value diversity, then to me, that's an entry point for you to have that conversation, whether you currently have that diversity or not. But if you're talking about diversity of thought, if you're talking, because I think that's what a lot of people say, they don't have like large minority populations. They're like, we have diversity of thought. And it's like, okay, great. But like, what does that mean? Like, what are you striving for? So, I mean, I think that's a great way to sort of bring up that conversation. And then one thing that I think I'm real big on, like using the resources like around you, like not having to recreate the wheel. I feel like every admissions office, especially now, should be having conversations with their sociology departments and their psychology departments, but more importantly, the sociology departments, to think about like, what kind of questions are we asking on the applications, right? Like, is that creating an obstacle, or is that providing a point of access? What things are we thinking about within our inter-office dynamics that maybe are contributing to racism that we didn't even realize were contributing? Like, I mean, I think the sociologists in sociology department at most of your institutions would like love to work with the admissions office and do some of that work, because some of the work they do with you could also provide research for them. And then you can oftentimes use their research to also benefit you. So I think I would highly recommend having conversations with some of the sociologists at your school, or doing research on sociology departments at other schools that maybe can come and that are nearby that can do work with you. Like I'm a huge fan of Dr. Ted Thornhill. He's at Florida Gulf Coast University, and he's actually done a lot of research on specifically how admissions officers view not only the name of applicants, but the activities they're involved in, and how their unconscious bias plays a role in whether they want to admit that kid or not. And so he's done some really interesting work. And so I would say look at like those, like his work, and he has, you know, researchers and grad students who are working at him, like, and he's super accessible. He will return emails. You can send him a message on Facebook. Like, I just like met him randomly and I was like, you're doing some pretty awesome work. And like, we chat all the time. So you can just access him, or just better yet, access the sociology department at your school. Cause I think that can provide a great resource, because you could go to them and say like, I think these conversations are important. I don't even know how to begin to have these conversations. And they may be able to give you some really good entry points on how to do that.
Yeah, it's gonna pop in, just even if you work at a school that has USG minimums and that's how you make your decisions, those conversations still need to happen, because you still have a million other programs that decisions aren't made that way. I think sometimes people who are higher up are like, well, we have, you know, these minimums, so it's an equitable system. And I'm like, no, ma'am, it's still not. So you still need to have those conversations. If you have an honors program, if you have scholarships, if you have other secondary admit programs on your campus, even the mandatory minimum stuff is kind of messed up, actually, if you think about it. So those conversations still happen, even if your admissions process is pretty black and white.
Okie dokie. Well, if I want this to last as long as it can, right? So if we go to 5 o'clock, we go to 5 o'clock, but I also don't want us to sit here and just stare at one another either. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Again, this will not be our last one. We hope to do these pretty regularly. So we hope to see you at our next one. I know Shireen and Shantika, both on the board, we're working on putting together the next one, and we'll get that information out there. Invite some more colleagues to come next time. We want this to be full. So we had, oh my gosh, I think 47 people at one point. So like 4 times as many people have come to any other of our GACRAO virtual talks. So I love it. I think that hopefully things like this will start to move the needle a little bit. But thank you guys for coming. And have a great day.
Taylor.
Yeah.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everybody.